Welcome to the Organizational Maneuverability Radio Show, Defying Gravity so your team can soar at altitude, with host Marshall Goldsmith, Executive Coach Randy Swaim. People think that in true synergism, we're just all doing it exactly the same. Well, in a real sense, that's just the superficial thing, and it's not really, aligned with that. Because if you think about it, when you're talking about factors out there in the current world, and it's very aligned with the organizational maneuverability concept that I have, guess what? Not every factor is exactly academic that comes on scene. And with what you're doing, it's not purely academic a lot of times. And the bottom line is when you're talking about true synergy, it's the idea where you're truly working together as a team, as a oneness and team. But the dysfunctional aspect of what a lot of people do is we're all doing it just the same way. And you'd be surprised at how many people I've heard talk, and they said, well, you know what, we did it, but that should have done this. And, no, you're not getting it done if that's what you're doing. And so when you're talking about real synergism, it's not just doing it exactly the same way every time, because guess what? One or two people on your team may have awareness of a factor that's coming on scene that nobody else saw yet. And they may have a good picture of what needs to adjust and adapt a little bit to make sure that doesn't cause a problem. And you know what? When they do that and they bring that into the team, true synergism does not mean that just everybody does it my way. That's it. No, not necessarily. True synergism happens when the team is truly together. And you know what? When you've got one person that sees a factor coming on scene that nobody else expected or whatever, and they communicate it, and you know what? The team comes together to see how they need to amend the the the, the strategy here, and change one little thing in what they're doing or whatever to get there. That's a key aspect about synergy. So a lot of people think that synergy, and if you get a lot of people that are just very just focused on themselves and just wanting to get a pat on the back and all that kind of stuff, realize that their definition of synergy is everybody just does what I say. Everybody does it my way. You know what? That's not true synergism. True synergism is when the team truly comes together with all of their awareness and their insights and all that, and their decision making, by the way, together. But how you can do that, and it's just a very key aspect that a lot of people don't truly understand. Synergism is not just everybody does it my way. No, you're being dysfunction if that's all you're thinking about. It's about how is a team truly becoming one and together. And that doesn't mean that we're just going to shut our brains off and do it your way. No, no. It means we're going to be able to assess and be aware of with our situational awareness of unexpected factors coming on the scene and what we can do in light of that to get past that and to be successful. And so this aspect of team synergy is a little bit different than a lot of people sort of think about it. A lot of people think about it just in terms of, you know what, everybody does it my way. Just that's how we're doing it. The dysfunctional control is when all the the boss is doing, or the manager, if all they're doing is controlling and just dictating and all that. That that's not being a leader, and it's not being ready for those situations. But you go with the other thing that you said, and it's true. If your leader comes and when they hear what you brought up as a thought and they have a short conversation with you about that, and you both come to some awareness together as to, okay, yeah, well, I'll tell you what. And if the manager looks at you and says, you know what, buddy, keep watch of that. And you let me know if that sort of starts to go out and starts to have an aspect of this that we don't need and stuff. You just let me know. And we've got a couple things here that we'll be ready that we can do if we need to. But thank you for bringing it up. We'll see what we can do on that. And there's been one or two times on that when I was a, a boss back in my career where somebody kind of came up and brought up something not about what we were doing, but about what they were seeing and everything. And there's a couple of times in my career where I've actually done that to the person because I said, tell me about what you perceived it doing. And he kind of shared what he was seeing and what he thought. And I said, I'll tell you what, let's get some thoughts on that and let's think about what we need to do in case that situation gets better, either stronger or not so strong, but see what we need to do on that. And that is true synergism. When you're talking about your manager, if your manager is simply telling you to shut up and just go do this or whatever, that's the dysfunctional aspect about it. If the manager is having those chats and bringing in some of those awareness stuff and getting some building some oneness in the team, that can be hugely synergistic. What that's a good point because here's the thing that if you have one person's insight is starting to control the team, you may have to have a conversation with the whole team, or you may have to go have a talk with that person. And when you do that, you got to know what the right questions are that you're going to
Right.
ask. And uh, I've had to do that one time in my entire career. I got the whole team together, and I was up at the uh, front of the. It was actually in a kind of a classroom, but I was at um, uh, the board speaking stuff and everything, and everything. And I brought up, and what I did is instead of attacking them, which is what a lot of people do or whatever, I asked them a couple of questions that got them bringing up some factors and stuff. And I had them come up on the board and write them down. And at the end of it, I stood up and I said, so what do you think? To what extent is this not good or whatever, kind of thing and all that. Or to what extent is it good? If we decide to go forward in this, what do we have to watch out for? And I forced them to be processing it. What a lot of dictatorial managers do is they just sit there and tell you, no, because you know what, this will do, this and that or whatever. And that's not really being a leader. What I did is I got them thinking and expanding. And what it is that time that we had together at that for about that hour there, we our team work really became aligned. And it was just amazing because they experienced something a little bit different. And in part, that's leadership. The easy way on that is to ensure that at the beginning, they were all aware of your real strategic vision. Because if you have kind of asked questions and kind of thrown things aside and talked all over the place, guess what? When you understand the brain and their mental processing, that may have put all that aside and they get distracted and they're thinking all about all this stuff, kind of thing. But, as a leader, if you have clarity on the strategic objective and a strategic objective that you all agreed to and came up with at the very beginning, that can be huge. I think that you are bringing up a good point, and it's a key aspect of everything I'm talking about here today. But when you think about neuroscience, and remember, and everything that I mentioned here is you already know, but your neuroscience, and I'll just kind of point out to people that the kind of the three key areas in your brain that works is your frontal lobe up here, which is kind of the lobe that does the mental processing and thinking through and assessing and things like that. In the very back here, it's the section of your brain where you just go into habit patterns and what your comfort level is. And unfortunately, that's what a ton of people in today's world do. Now, you got to be aware if you're just going to that because it's a comfort level and it's just okay, it's just what I've always thought. You know what? That may not be accurate. That may not be appropriate. But if you're thinking that you have to move out of that just to change it, you're not getting it necessarily right either. So you have to have true clarity, and that all has to come from the way you're processing your the situations and the factors and all that. So when you're talking about neuroscience, and this is why when I deal with people, and it's a key aspect that when you're being a leader in your team, you have to understand the basics of neuroscience and how the brain works. Because guess what? If you're doing it in such a way where you're forcing it to just go into um, the back here and in just this is what it is, kind of thing or whatever, you're not getting it done, and you're not building their growth and their real success in it. But if they can come out and understand the certain factors that are a little bit different than what they'd expected, that can be huge. And so it's just it's a key aspect, like I said, on the brain and all the two key areas that people kind of have to think about. And the other part of it too is to what extent, and going with neuroscience, and you know this, but the neurotransmitters, the brain releases certain chemicals based on what it's thinking and processing and everything. And as you know, if you have if your brain is generating a norepinephrine, then it's going to make you want to go fight off with your people and all this kind of stuff, and all this kind of stuff. That's not effective in what you're trying to accomplish. If as a leader you're doing it in such a way where you're having your people build that norepinephrine release in their brains and everything, that can be uh, bad situations. And of course, the dopamine fix. The dopamine fix is where people, it's all about me, I'm doing good, kind of thing, and all that kind of stuff. But you know what? If that's their only focus, to call attention to themselves, they're not getting the job done. And so there's just a lot of aspects about that and awareness on the neuroscience and the brain and what it does with kind of the release of the neurotransmitters and everything. It has a lot of impacts on your people. And I ask the people that are perhaps listening to this recording, I simply ask you that when you're talking to your team members, whether you're the leader and manager or you're not, when you're talking to your team members, to what extent are you having their brains release the wrong neurotransmitters? To what extent are you doing that in such a way where it's not being good? And one of the things that you have to really um, be kind of aware of on that is what are we doing, and what am I doing really? And so often in today's world, managers are just saying, well, it's my job to just dictate and you just go do this, and all that kind of stuff. And guess what? You're really not getting it done when you do that, and you're not making it um, uh, a neuroscience aligned thing or a synergistic aligned thing. Because if you have what you may have a certain team, because I'll tell you what, there's been one team that when I got them kind of going in this, at the end of the meeting, the entire team was like, oh, yeah. And it was much better than at the beginning of the meeting. And so, as a leader, those are some things that you have to uh, be aware of. And like I said, there's some key aspects about neuroscience and being basically aware of the brain and what it's doing and what are we initiating in our people with that we have to be aware of that, and we have to make sure we're not causing the problem. And so it's just a just a key aspect that a lot of people today don't realize. And but you know what, when you're talking about being a leader, it's not just about you dictating. It's not just about you, playing your game or calling attention to yourself or anything like that. But it's in a way where not only are you growing and developing your team, but you're helping them do that in such a way that, boy, they want to be part of this team a lot more than when it was. And so it just when you're talking about the neuroscience aspect of it, these are just some of the things that are very key when you're talking about trying to lead your team. I would just simply say this, that because a lot of, and you hear this with a lot of, um, kind of managers today, that they think because I'm the manager, I'm all this, and you know what, kind of thing like that. And and if you're a true leader, you have to realize you have to realize that it's not just about you telling them what to do. It's about you learning even as you go. Because you know what? Not every single, situation that comes up was expected. If your people see in you, wow, look what he did with that. Oh, wow, because they see you and you went, yep, yep. And you say, you know what? We'll all learn more from that. That's good. That's good, kind of thing. And they see you doing that. That is huge. And I will tell you this, that just if all you're thinking about is I'm here and this is my career and I'm doing all this, you're not getting the job done. And what I will say is I'll share one little thing with you here, but I'll also share, not I'll have to remember, I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was I think it was Kurt Shu or something. Forgive me, I can't don't exactly remember his name, but he was a master person in the auto racing stuff around and everything. And he was a winner ever since he was a teenager, kind of thing. He had just a whole ton of winnings behind him and everything. Excuse me. And uh he came in and he unfortunately just went to the hospital, I think a day or two ago, and passed away. And so he's been in the news the last couple of days. But one of the things that they showed on the TV, sort of talking about him after his last uh, big time win, which was just recently, they had uh, uh, you know, an investigator kind of just, with a microphone, just talking to him and all this, and and she asked him about, kind of what he's doing, and he looked at her and he said, "I'm going to keep doing this." And she said, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he looked at her and he said, "I'm going to keep doing this because you know what? How do you know when the last moment is there? I'm going to keep working it." And that is so, the reason that struck me so much is because that is totally aligned with what I have told people about my life. And I've had a few people ask me, because I'm next month I turn 72, kind of thing. But I've had people ask me uh, a few times over the last few years or whatever. I've had people say, well, Randy, when are you going to retire? And my answer is always very aligned with what he said. Because my answer has always been this: when am I going to retire? When I take my last breath. Because I said, you know what? I am going to run through the tape. And it's very much aligned with what he said. It's very exactly the same. And it's, because for me, it's not just about me. It's not just about all that. For me, it's about bringing some potential to people and bringing some awareness to people and hopefully making some difference in other people's lives. Um, and I want to do that right up until I take my last breath. And if I do that, then I'll be okay, and I'll be appreciative. On any aspect of leadership, you can bring in neuroscience application. No two ways about it.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.